I want a child, but not with you, the millionaire CEO said coldly. 2 years later, he saw her again, and the child who looked exactly like him. The city lights shimmered through the rain that night, streaking across the windows of Michael Ross's penthouse like molten gold. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that comes right before something breaks. Emily stood in the middle of the living room, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear her own thoughts. She had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, had imagined it going so many ways, but nothing could have prepared her for the icy look in his eyes when she finally spoke. "Michael," she said softly, her voice cracking, "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air, fragile and trembling, like glass about to shatter. For a moment, he didn't move. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then, slowly, he stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "You're what?" he said, his tone low and controlled, but underneath it, she could hear the danger. "Pregnant. I'm going to have a baby," she whispered again, clutching her hands to keep them from shaking. She thought maybe, just maybe, he would take a step toward her, maybe he would smile, maybe he would touch her cheek like he used to and say it would be okay. But instead, he laughed, not kindly, but bitterly, like her words had insulted him. "You can't be serious," he said. "Emily, do you have any idea what you're saying? What this means?" She tried to meet his gaze, but his eyes were cold steel. "It means we're having a child, Michael," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "Our child." He turned away sharply, running a hand through his hair. "No," he muttered. "Not ours. I can't do this. I won't." She felt her throat close. "What are you saying?" she whispered. He turned to face her again, his face hard, every trace of tenderness gone. "I told you before," he said, each word like a knife. "I want a child, but not with you." The word sliced through her, stealing her breath. For a second, she thought she must have misheard him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He continued, his voice colder now. "You were a distraction, Emily. That's all. I can't have this ruining everything I've built. My life, my company, my future. I won't throw it all away because you made a mistake." "A mistake," she repeated, the word barely audible. "That's what you think this is?" Her chest felt tight, her world collapsing in slow motion. He looked away, his jaw clenched, unwilling to meet her eyes. "You need to take care of it," he said finally, his voice distant. "You can't keep it. I'll make sure you're compensated, but this," he gestured between them, "this ends now." She stared at him, disbelief turning into horror. "You can't mean that," she said, stepping closer, her voice trembling. "Michael, please, this is our baby." He flinched as if the word burned him. "Don't call it that," he snapped. "I'm not doing this." His anger filled the room like thunder. Emily felt something inside her break. The man she had loved, the man she had believed was capable of kindness, of warmth, was gone. In his place stood someone she didn't recognize, someone who looked at her like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't let him see her break. "I thought I knew you," she whispered. "I thought you loved me." He didn't answer. He simply walked to the door, his movements sharp, mechanical, as if he couldn't get away from her fast enough. "Don't do this, Michael," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't make me hate you." He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, but he didn't turn around. "Then hate me," he said quietly. "It'll make it easier for both of us." The door closed behind him, and the sound of it echoed like a gunshot. She stood there for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe. The apartment felt suddenly enormous, the silence heavy, suffocating. The rain outside grew harder, slamming against the glass like it wanted to come in. She sank to the floor, clutching her stomach, whispering through her tears, "It's okay. I'm here. I won't let you go." It wasn't just a promise to the baby, it was a vow to herself. Hours passed before she finally gathered the strength to stand. She packed her things slowly, methodically, as though if she moved carefully enough, she could hold herself together. The city outside glowed with indifferent lights, the world still turning as hers fell apart. When she finally stepped out into the rain, it was cold, soaking through her coat instantly, but she didn't care. She walked without looking back, each step heavy but steady. The cab driver didn't ask questions when she gave him the address of a cheap motel on the other side of town. She sat in the back seat, staring out at the neon reflections on the wet pavement, her thoughts a blur. By the time she reached the small, dimly lit room, exhaustion had consumed her. She dropped her bag on the floor and lay down on the bed, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to cry, quietly, helplessly, until there were no tears left. When sleep finally took her, it was uneasy and shallow, but somewhere in the darkness, there was a tiny flicker of peace. Despite everything, she wasn't alone anymore. Inside her, life was beginning. And that life, fragile and small as it was, gave her something Michael Ross could never take away: hope. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a fog, where every day bled into the next and the nights seemed endless. Emily had never known what true loneliness was until then. The silence of her new apartment was almost unbearable, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the steady ticking of an old clock she had bought at a thrift store. She would wake up every morning to pale light seeping through thin curtains and stare at the ceiling, wondering how her life had come to this. Sometimes she imagined she would wake up and realize it had all been a nightmare, that she would hear Michael's voice calling her from the kitchen, his laugh filling the room like it used to. But when she reached out, her hand met only the empty space beside her, and reality pressed down like a weight she couldn't escape. She worked as much as she could to keep herself busy. The small clinic she had found in a rundown part of town wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work, and it kept her from falling apart. Her co-workers didn't ask questions about her past, which was a mercy she hadn't expected. She wore loose sweaters to hide the growing curve of her stomach, unsure if she was ready to tell anyone yet. There was a certain quiet dignity in keeping her secret, like holding a piece of her old life close to her heart, away from the world's judgment. The pregnancy wasn't easy. The exhaustion was constant, and some mornings she woke up nauseated and dizzy, her body aching from lack of sleep. But every time she heard her baby's heartbeat during the checkups, a steady, miraculous rhythm, it reminded her that there was something good still inside her life. It was as if that sound stitched her back together each time she thought she might fall apart. She started talking to the baby sometimes, quietly, almost like prayer. "You're stronger than me," she would whisper with a small, trembling smile. "You'll have to be." The nights were the hardest. That was when memories came back, sharp and merciless. She remembered the way Michael's hands used to fit around hers, the warmth in his voice before it turned cold, the promises that now felt like lies. She wondered if he ever thought about her. Did he regret it? Did he feel anything at all when he walked away? Every time she tried to hate him, she found herself failing. Anger would rise in her chest like fire, but it always burned out into sadness. She knew she had to let him go, but letting go of the person who had once been your whole world wasn't something that happened overnight, it was something you did a little at a time, piece by painful piece. By her 5th month, her belly had rounded enough that hiding it became impossible. She told her boss at the clinic, expecting judgment or pity, but instead, he simply nodded and told her to take care of herself. That small act of kindness nearly brought her to tears. The other nurses began to bring her small gifts, a thermos for tea, a pair of warm socks, a box of chocolates. She realized then that not all people turned away when life became complicated. It wasn't love, but it was something close to hope. One evening, after a particularly long day, she found herself sitting on a park bench overlooking the water. The air was cold and damp, and the city lights shimmered on the surface like scattered stars. She rested a hand on her stomach and watched the reflections ripple. "Do you think he'll ever know about you?" she whispered. "Would he even care?" The baby kicked softly in response, as if answering her, and she laughed quietly through her tears. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "You have me. That's enough." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The months passed in slow rhythm, and with each one, she grew stronger. She saved money, she moved to a slightly better apartment, she learned how to live for herself again. There were moments of peace now, small, fleeting, but real. She began to feel proud of her resilience, proud of surviving something that had nearly destroyed her. Then came the night she went into labor. It was early spring, and rain drummed against the windows as the contractions began. Fear hit her first, raw, paralyzing fear that she wouldn't make it, that she couldn't do this alone. But then the thought came, clear and steady, she had already done everything alone. She could do this too. She took a taxi to the hospital, clutching her small bag, breathing through the pain as the city flashed by in streaks of wet neon. The nurses were kind, their voices calm and reassuring, but the room still felt too big, too empty without someone waiting beside her. The pain grew unbearable, waves crashing through her body, but somewhere beneath it all, she found strength she didn't know she had. Hours later, when the cries finally filled the room, she broke into quiet sobs of relief. The doctor placed a tiny bundle in her arms, and Emily stared down at her daughter, barely able to breathe. The baby's skin was soft and pink, her tiny fingers curling instinctively around Emily's thumb. But it was the eyes that undid her, gray eyes, deep and searching, so achingly familiar. "Hi," she whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I'm your mom." The baby blinked slowly, her mouth opening in a small yawn, and Emily felt something shift inside her. All the pain, the heartbreak, the loneliness, it was still there, but now it had meaning. It had led her here, to this moment, to this child. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead and closed her eyes. "You're my whole world now," she murmured. "And I promise, I'll never let anyone hurt you the way he hurt me." When morning came, the storm had passed, and pale sunlight streamed through the window. The world outside looked new, washed clean. Emily sat in bed, the baby asleep against her chest, and smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't the bright, careless smile she once had, it was smaller, softer, the kind of smile that came from surviving something that should have broken you. She didn't know what the future held, but as she looked down at her daughter, she realized she didn't need to. For the first time, the unknown didn't scare her. It felt like possibility. The months after Lily's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights, soft cries, and quiet resilience. Emily quickly learned that motherhood was both the most beautiful and the hardest thing she had ever faced. The apartment was small, the bills were endless, and the loneliness sometimes pressed so heavily on her chest that she thought she might suffocate under it. Yet every time she looked at her daughter, at those gray eyes that watched her with complete trust, something inside her steadied. Lily was tiny, fragile, and perfect. Her little fingers curled around Emily's every chance they got, and in that small touch Emily found strength to keep going, even on the days she felt she couldn't. The first few weeks were chaos. Emily was constantly exhausted. She often woke before dawn, her back aching, her arms trembling from holding Lily for hours. But even through the haze of exhaustion, there was something magical about those quiet mornings when it was just the two of them. The city outside still slept, the streets empty and gray, and she would sit by the window, rocking Lily slowly, whispering stories about a future that didn't yet exist. She told her about the ocean she wanted her to see one day, about the flowers that bloomed in spring, about kindness and courage and love that didn't hurt. "You'll have all of that," she would whisper. "I'll make sure of it." Her days were spent working part-time at the clinic and her nights caring for Lily. She learned how to balance bottles in one hand while typing medical notes with the other. She learned how to smile even when she wanted to cry. The doctors she worked with respected her quiet determination, though none of them knew her story. Sometimes, when one of the older nurses saw the dark circles under her eyes, they would press a hand on her shoulder and say softly, "You're doing fine, sweetheart." Those small moments of compassion kept her going. Money was always tight. She skipped meals more often than she admitted, making sure Lily had everything she needed. The stroller she used was second-hand, the crib was something she'd found online for free, and the baby clothes were donated by a kind patient who had noticed her belly growing. Yet, in that small apartment, surrounded by chipped furniture and hand-me-down blankets, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. Every sleepless night, every tear, every ache meant something now. Her life had direction again. Sometimes, though, the past came creeping back. There were nights when she couldn't sleep, when she'd find herself staring at the ceiling, remembering his voice, his cold words. "I want a child, but not with you." They replayed in her mind like a broken record, and she would feel that same sharp pain she'd felt the night he threw her out. But then Lily would stir beside her, her small hand searching for Emily's, and all the bitterness would fade. She realized that out of the cruelest moment of her life had come something so pure that it healed her more than time ever could. When Lily turned 6 months old, Emily took her to the park for the first time. It was early morning, the air still cool, the grass glistening with dew. She spread a small blanket on the ground and laid Lily down, watching as her daughter kicked her legs happily and reached for the sunlight. An older woman sitting on a nearby bench smiled at her. "First one?" she asked kindly. Emily nodded with a shy smile. "You're doing a wonderful job," the woman said simply, before turning back to her book. That sentence, so casually spoken, stayed with Emily for weeks. It was the first time anyone had told her she was enough. As Lily grew, she became more curious, more alive. Her laugh filled the apartment, echoing off the walls like music. She had a habit of tugging at Emily's hair and babbling nonsense words that somehow made perfect sense to both of them. On hard days, Emily would hold her close and breathe in the baby scent of her skin, reminding herself that everything she endured was worth it. There was a quiet joy in the ordinary moments, feeding her, bathing her, watching her fall asleep with one tiny hand curled near her face. 2 years passed almost without her noticing. Emily had built a life around her daughter, a fragile but steady rhythm of work, home, and laughter. She had stopped thinking about Michael, or at least, she told herself she had. Every now and then, when she passed a newspaper or caught a glimpse of the financial news on television, she would see his name mentioned: still successful, still powerful, still untouchable. She would look away quickly, her heart tightening, but not from love anymore. From something closer to pity. He had everything: money, power, respect, but she had something far more precious. She had peace. She had Lily. One evening, after a long day at the clinic, she sat with Lily on the couch, reading her a story. Lily's head rested against her chest, her small body warm and heavy with sleep. Emily ran her fingers through her daughter's dark curls and whispered, "You're my miracle, you know that?" Lily didn't answer, she was already half asleep, but she smiled, a soft, drowsy smile that made Emily's chest ache with love. After she put Lily to bed, Emily stood by the window, looking out at the city. The lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone anymore. Life wasn't easy, and it probably never would be, but she had found strength in places she never thought existed. She had learned that love wasn't something you begged for, it was something you built, something you gave freely without expecting it back. And as she stood there, her reflection faint in the glass, she realized that she no longer saw the broken woman who had walked out into the rain 2 years ago. She saw someone new, someone stronger, calmer, and full of quiet fire. She didn't know that fate was already turning, that her world was about to collide once more with the man she had sworn she would never see again. But for now, in that small apartment with her daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, Emily allowed herself to feel content. The storm had passed. Or so she thought. The morning it happened began like any other, calm and ordinary, the kind of day that felt safe in its predictability. Emily woke before the sun, the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. She made coffee quietly so as not to wake Lily, who was still curled under her small pink blanket. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry detergent, the little comforts she had built into her life to keep it warm. She moved through her morning routine with practiced ease, brushing her hair, packing Lily's small lunch for daycare, and humming softly to fill the silence. It was peaceful, and for once, she believed that peace might actually last. By the time she reached the clinic, the clouds had started to clear, leaving the city washed and glistening. She greeted the receptionist, hung her coat on the back of the office chair, and sat down to organize patient files. The soft buzz of conversation, the smell of antiseptic and coffee, the familiar rhythm of the workday, everything felt steady. Then, just before noon, the clinic manager entered with a tall man in a dark suit, his voice carrying that overly cheerful tone people used when they were nervous. "Everyone, this is our new investor," he said. "Mr. Ross will be working closely with us moving forward." Her heart stopped. She didn't have to look up to know that name. It was one that had haunted her dreams, that had been both a wound and a warning for the past 2 years. The papers in her hands trembled as she tried to keep breathing. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to run, she lifted her eyes. There he was. Michael Ross. He looked almost exactly the same and yet entirely different. His dark hair was slightly longer, his face sharper, as though the years had carved more gravity into his features. He still wore that effortless confidence like armor, the kind that made people pay attention when he walked into a room. But beneath it, there was something else now, something quieter, wearier, like he had spent years chasing something he couldn't find. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the air seemed to leave the room. Emily's first thought was disbelief. He couldn't possibly recognize her. Not here, not like this. She looked away quickly, her pulse pounding. But when the meeting ended and he turned to leave, his gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than it should have. She could feel it, heavy and searching, as if he was trying to place her. She prayed he wouldn't. That prayer went unanswered. Later that day, she was standing by the coffee machine, pouring herself a cup, when she felt a presence beside her. "Emily," came a voice, low and uncertain. Her hand froze midair. Slowly, she turned her head. He was standing there, close enough that she could smell his cologne, familiar, achingly so. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "It's been a while," he said finally, his tone softer than she remembered. She stared at him, her expression carefully neutral. Yes, she said quietly. It has. Her voice didn't shake, though her hands wanted to. He looked at her, searching her face for something, perhaps the girl he had once known, the one he had so easily destroyed. But that girl was gone. What stood before him now was someone stronger, steadier, someone who no longer needed him. He seemed to notice it too. His jaw tightened slightly. "You look different," he said, and there was something like regret in his voice. "Life does that," she replied simply, setting her cup down. She was about to walk away when he spoke again, more hesitantly this time. "You still work in healthcare?" "Yes," she said. "And I love it." "That's good," he murmured, almost as if talking to himself. Then, after a pause, he added, "Listen, about." "Don't," she interrupted, her tone firm. He blinked, caught off guard. "Don't say anything you don't mean. You don't owe me explanations, Michael." For a long moment, they stood in silence. She could feel the weight of his gaze, could sense the storm of things he wanted to say but couldn't. Finally, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, a man who suddenly looked smaller in his expensive suit than she'd ever seen him before. That evening, after work, she picked up Lily from daycare. The little girl came running toward her, her laughter bright and sweet. Emily crouched down to scoop her into her arms, breathing in the soft scent of her daughter's hair. The world seemed right again in that moment. "Guess what, Mommy?" Lily said, her small voice full of excitement. "We're making animal masks tomorrow." Emily smiled, her heart melting the way it always did when Lily smiled. They walked home together, hand in hand, the city glowing gold in the sunset. But when they turned the corner near the park, Emily's breath caught. Across the street, standing by a sleek black car, was Michael. He wasn't looking at her at first, but when Lily's laughter carried across the street, he turned, and froze. For a moment, time stopped. He stared at them, his eyes wide, his expression unreadable. Lily, oblivious to the tension, waved at him cheerfully, her little hand swinging in the air. He didn't wave back. He was too stunned, his gaze fixed on the child, her dark curls, her small smile, her unmistakable gray eyes. His own eyes. Emily felt the world tilt. Her pulse roared in her ears, her stomach twisting with panic. She gripped Lily's hand tighter, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's go." She didn't look back as she crossed the street and hurried home, but she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared around the corner. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Emily sat in the dark, staring at the quiet glow of the city through the window. She knew what was coming. He had seen. He knew. She didn't know if he would show up tomorrow, or the day after that, or if he would try to find her again. But she knew one thing for certain, her carefully built world was about to change. She had spent 2 years building walls strong enough to keep him out, and now, with one look, he had found a way back in. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and whispered to the night, "You're not taking her from me." And even as she said it, her heart trembled with fear. Because deep down, she wasn't entirely sure if she was ready to face the man who had destroyed her, or the part of herself that still remembered what it felt like to love him. The next morning, Emily woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest, the kind that made it difficult to breathe. She had barely slept, her mind kept replaying the moment in the park when Michael saw Lily. His expression, shock, disbelief, recognition, was burned into her memory. She had hoped that their paths would never cross again, that fate had finally given her peace. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. She stood by the window, watching the early light creep into the sky, and tried to convince herself that maybe she was wrong, that maybe he wouldn't pursue it. But deep down, she knew him too well. Michael Ross was not the kind of man to walk away from something that shook him. He would come. It was only a matter of time. When she arrived at the clinic that morning, her stomach twisted at every sound, every footstep that echoed down the hallway. The world around her felt sharper, as if everything had suddenly been thrown into focus. She greeted her coworkers with a strained smile, pretending everything was normal. But she couldn't stop checking the door every few minutes, her nerves fraying with every tick of the clock. At lunchtime, as she was about to leave the staff room, she froze. He was standing in the corridor, waiting. He looked calmer than she expected, but there was a tightness around his mouth that betrayed the storm underneath. "Emily," he said quietly. She didn't answer, only turned to walk away, but he followed. "Please, just a minute," he said. "We need to talk." She stopped and turned, her voice steady even though her heart pounded against her ribs. "There's nothing to talk about." "That little girl," he said, and his voice faltered slightly, the composure cracking just enough for her to hear the disbelief. "She's mine, isn't she?" The words hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Emily looked at him for a long moment, her throat tightening. "You lost the right to ask that question the day you walked out," she said finally. His eyes darkened, a flicker of guilt passing over them, but he didn't back down. "Just tell me the truth." "What would the truth change?" she shot back, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "Would it make you the man you weren't then? Would it undo what you said to me?" He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I made a mistake," he muttered. "I know that now." The bitterness in her laugh startled him. "A mistake? You threw me out like I was nothing. You told me you wanted a child, but not with me. That wasn't a mistake, Michael. That was cruelty." The corridor was empty except for them, the air thick with everything they had never said. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He stood there, silent, his hands in his pockets, looking like a man who just realized he was standing in the ruins of his own making. After a long moment, she turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "I want to see her," he said softly. Emily froze. "No," she said immediately. "Absolutely not. You can't keep her from me," he said, stepping closer. "She's my daughter." She spun around, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't get to call her that. You don't know her. You weren't there when she was born, when she cried through the nights, when I couldn't afford diapers and still made it work. You don't get to claim her just because you suddenly decided you care." He flinched at her words. She saw something crack behind his composed expression, shame, regret, maybe even heartbreak, but she refused to soften. "Emily, please," he said, his tone quieter now, desperate. "I just want to make things right." She shook her head slowly. "You can't make right what you destroyed. I won't let you hurt her the way you hurt me." She walked away before he could respond, her pulse thundering in her ears. When she got home that evening, she was so exhausted she could barely think. But when she opened the door and saw Lily sitting on the floor, surrounded by crayons and paper, smiling up at her with pure joy, all the fear melted into something else, resolve. She knelt beside her daughter and wrapped her arms around her, holding her close. "Mommy missed you today," she whispered, breathing in the comforting scent of baby shampoo and crayons. Lily giggled and hugged her back, unaware of the storm looming on the horizon. For the next few days, Emily tried to return to normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. Michael began showing up near the clinic, sometimes under the pretense of checking on the investment, other times waiting outside as if hoping she'd stop to talk. She never did. She avoided him at every turn, but one evening, as she was leaving work, he was waiting by her car. "I'm not going away," he said quietly when she tried to pass. "I can't." Something in his voice made her stop. It wasn't arrogance or control, it was desperation. He looked tired, his usual confidence stripped away. "You don't understand," she said, her voice weary. "It's not just about you anymore. I have to protect her." "And you think I'd hurt her?" he asked softly. "You already did," she replied, her tone flat. "You just don't know it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, she got into her car, but before driving away, she looked at him one last time. "If you really want to do what's right, then leave us alone." Her voice was quiet but firm. "You made your choice a long time ago. Now let me live with mine." He didn't follow her that time, but as she drove home, she knew it wasn't over. Something in his eyes told her that he wouldn't give up. And even though the thought terrified her, a small, treacherous part of her heart wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had changed. That night, after putting Lily to sleep, Emily sat on the couch, staring at the photograph she had taken when Lily was a baby, tiny hands clutching her finger, that same determined expression she saw in the mirror every morning. She traced the outline of her daughter's face and whispered, "No one will take you from me." But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that the past she had buried was clawing its way back, and that this time, it wouldn't let her go without a fight. The following week unfolded with the same relentless tension that had taken over Emily's life since Michael's return. Every morning she woke with the same weight pressing against her chest, a mix of anger and fear, a reminder that the quiet world she had built for Lily and herself was cracking. She went through her days on autopilot, trying to keep her composure at work, smiling for her patients, keeping her tone gentle when she spoke to Lily. But inside, she was unraveling. She could feel Michael's presence everywhere, his gaze, his voice, the ghost of everything she had once loved and hated about him. And the worst part was that he wasn't the same man who had thrown her away. That made everything more complicated. He had changed, or at least he seemed to have. His arrogance was muted, replaced by something quieter and more human. He no longer tried to confront her directly at work. Instead, he found small ways to show he was trying, sending donations to the daycare Lily attended, covering the clinic's medical debt for low-income families, never taking credit for any of it. She knew he was doing it for her, for them, but she refused to acknowledge it. Yet every act chipped away at the fortress she had built inside herself. One evening, as she was walking home with Lily, the rain began to fall suddenly, a downpour that drenched them within seconds. Laughing, Lily lifted her small face to the sky, letting the rain soak her hair. Emily pulled off her jacket and tried to cover her daughter's head when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Get in," Michael said, holding the car door open. She froze, the sound of his voice both comforting and terrifying. He was standing beside a black SUV, rain dripping from his hair and shoulders, but he didn't move closer. He just waited. Emily hesitated for a long moment, torn between pride and practicality. Lily was shivering now, her small body trembling. Finally, she sighed and picked her up. "Just this once," she said quietly, stepping toward the car. Inside, it was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Michael drove silently, glancing at them occasionally through the mirror. When he handed her a towel from the back seat, their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second, and she felt that electric jolt she had spent years trying to forget. When he stopped in front of her apartment building, Emily opened the door immediately. "Thank you," she said curtly, ready to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Emily, wait." She turned reluctantly. He looked at her, rain still sliding down his face. I know I can't undo what I did, he said quietly. But please believe me when I say I regret it every single day. I was a coward. I thought I was protecting myself, but I destroyed the only thing that ever mattered. She wanted to tell him that it was too late, that apologies didn't change the past, but when she met his eyes, she saw something raw there, something that made her chest ache despite everything. Michael, stop, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You don't get to do this now. You don't get to walk back in and pretend you care. I'm not pretending, he said. I want to be part of her life. You think you can just show up and decide that? She asked, her voice rising. You weren't there when she needed you. You don't even know what she likes to eat, or how she sleeps, or how she says the word butterfly wrong every single time. You don't know her. You don't know us. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, accepting her anger. Then let me learn, he said quietly. The simplicity of his words caught her off guard. For the first time in years, he didn't sound like the man who gave orders and expected obedience. He sounded like a man asking for permission to try. She didn't answer. Instead, she took Lily in her arms, mumbled another quiet thank you, and disappeared into the building. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept seeing his face, hearing his words. She hated that part of her still wanted to believe him. People didn't change that easily. Yet the man she had seen in the car wasn't the same one who had shattered her. There had been sincerity in his eyes, maybe even love. But she reminded herself of the nights she'd spent alone, the tears, the fear, the humiliation of begging him not to throw her out. She couldn't risk opening that door again. Over the next few weeks, though, he kept showing up. Never intrusively, never demanding. Once, she found a small box on her doorstep. Inside was a wooden music box, hand-carved, with a note that said, "For Lily. From someone who wants to know her favorite lullaby." Another time, he waited outside the clinic just to walk her home when the power went out in the city. He didn't speak much, he just walked beside her in silence, their footsteps echoing in the dark. One evening, as the city lights reflected off the wet streets, Lily spotted him waiting by the gate. Her eyes lit up. "Mommy. It's the nice man with the car," she said cheerfully, waving her small hand. Emily froze, her stomach tightening. Michael smiled gently at Lily, crouching down to her level. "Hey there, sunshine," he said softly. "Do you like the music box?" Lily nodded eagerly, clutching Emily's hand. "It plays the sleepy song," she said proudly. "Mommy sings it to me." His smile faltered slightly, and Emily could see the emotion behind his calm expression. That moment, Lily's innocence, his quiet awe, unraveled something inside her. For the first time, she saw what it did to him to realize what he had missed. He wasn't angry or defensive. He was broken by it. She didn't say anything, just watched as he handed Lily a small paper boat he had folded from a napkin. "For the next rain," he said with a soft smile. Lily giggled and took it. As they walked away, Emily felt tears sting her eyes. The man she had once hated had somehow found a way to reach her again, not through grand gestures or promises, but through something she hadn't expected, patience. And though she told herself it didn't matter, that she wouldn't forgive him, something inside her had already begun to shift. She hated how easily old memories returned, the warmth of his touch, the laughter they once shared, the way he used to look at her like she was the only person in the world. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Emily stood at the window again, looking out at the rain-slick streets. Somewhere out there, she knew he was thinking about them too. For the first time, she didn't feel anger. She felt something far more dangerous, a flicker of hope. Weeks passed, and life began to take on a rhythm that Emily hadn't expected. Michael became a quiet but undeniable presence in their world. He didn't force himself into their lives, but he lingered at the edges, showing up when she least expected him, always careful, always measured. Sometimes he dropped by the park on Saturdays, claiming it was coincidence that he was there when Lily played on the swings. Other times he sent small, thoughtful things for Lily, a new book about animals, a puzzle shaped like stars, crayons in her favorite colors. He never overstepped, and perhaps that was what made it harder for Emily to keep her walls up. His patience disarmed her more effectively than his power ever could. Lily adored him without understanding who he truly was. She called him the nice man, and her innocent joy every time she saw him made it nearly impossible for Emily to keep them apart. One afternoon, while sitting on a park bench watching Lily chase butterflies, Michael sat beside Emily, a comfortable silence stretching between them. "She's incredible," he said quietly, his voice carrying something reverent, as if he was afraid to break the spell of watching his daughter play. Emily's heart ached at the sound of it. "She is," she said softly, without looking at him. "She's everything." For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he said, "You did all this alone." His words were not a question, but a statement filled with awe and regret. She finally turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I had no choice," she said simply. "You made sure of that." He nodded slowly, the admission slicing through him. "I know," he said. "I was a fool. I thought I could control everything in my life, but I couldn't even understand the one person who truly cared about me." His honesty caught her off guard. It wasn't the rehearsed charm she used to hear, this was raw, unguarded. She didn't know how to respond, so she said nothing. Over the next few weeks, his presence became a fragile truce between them. He started spending short moments with Lily, with Emily always close by, watching carefully. They went to the zoo once, a spontaneous trip that Lily wouldn't stop talking about for days. Emily hadn't planned to let it happen, but when Michael showed up at the park that morning with tickets in his hand and Lily's face lit up with pure excitement, she couldn't bring herself to say no. Watching them together was both beautiful and painful. Michael carried Lily on his shoulders, pointing at giraffes and penguins, his laughter genuine and warm. It was a side of him Emily had never seen before, the powerful, distant CEO reduced to a man who made silly animal noises just to hear a little girl giggle. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Emily sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, her thoughts tangled. She couldn't deny the truth anymore. He was changing, not in words, but in actions. And that scared her more than his anger ever had. Because if he had truly changed, if the man who once broke her heart was now capable of love, then she would have to face something she had spent years avoiding, the part of her that still loved him. The next morning, she found an envelope slid under her door. It wasn't his usual subtle gesture. Inside was a letter in his handwriting. It wasn't long, but every word felt deliberate. He wrote that he knew he had no right to ask for forgiveness, but he wanted to try to earn it, not for himself, but for Lily. He wrote that seeing her had forced him to face everything he had run from, his fear, his pride, his own loneliness. And then he ended it with a single line that made her chest tighten painfully, "You were right. Love isn't about control. It's about staying even when it terrifies you." She read the letter twice, her eyes blurring by the end. Part of her wanted to tear it up, to bury it, to pretend none of it mattered. But another part, the part that had always believed there was still good in him, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Still, she wasn't ready. Forgiveness was a luxury she wasn't sure she could afford. A week later, Lily got sick. It started as a fever that worsened overnight. Emily spent the night sitting beside her bed, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, whispering lullabies she barely had the energy to sing. By morning, the fever had climbed higher, and panic clawed at her chest. She rushed Lily to the hospital, her mind a blur of fear. Hours later, she sat in the sterile waiting room, her hands trembling as she filled out forms. That was when Michael appeared, breathless, as if he had run the entire way. "Emily," he said, his voice tight with worry. "What happened?" She was too exhausted to argue, too terrified to care how he had found out. "Fever," she said weakly. "They're running tests." His expression softened, and without asking permission, he sat beside her. For the next several hours, he didn't leave. He fetched water, spoke to doctors, held her hand when she couldn't stop shaking. And when Lily finally woke up, drowsy but smiling, he was there too, standing quietly at the edge of the bed, his eyes glistening with relief. It was in that hospital room, under the harsh fluorescent lights, that something shifted irreversibly between them. Emily saw a man stripped of his pride and ego, a man whose entire world now revolved around a small girl who didn't even know she was saving him. When Lily reached out a tiny hand toward him, mumbling, "Stay," he did. He sat beside her bed, gently brushing her hair from her forehead as she drifted back to sleep. Emily watched in silence, her heart breaking open in ways she didn't expect. Later that night, after Lily was resting, Michael walked Emily to the hallway. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know you still don't trust me. But I need you to know, I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him, exhaustion written all over her face, and said quietly, "You said that once before." "And I failed," he replied. "But this time, I'm not running. Even if you never forgive me, I'll still be here." For the first time, she believed him. She didn't say it out loud, but deep down, something inside her softened. The man who once left her in the rain had returned, not to take, not to control, but to stay. And that, more than any apology, was what she had waited for. Months passed after that night in the hospital, and everything began to change in quiet, unspoken ways. Michael became a constant presence, no longer hovering at the edges of their lives but slowly becoming part of them. He didn't force it, he earned it, piece by piece, through patience and humility that Emily would never have believed him capable of. Every morning, he called to check how Lily was feeling, and every weekend, he asked if he could see her. Sometimes Emily said yes, sometimes no, but he never pushed. When he did come, he spent hours on the floor building towers out of blocks, letting Lily knock them over and laughing when she squealed with joy. There was a gentleness in him now, one that made it harder for Emily to hold on to her anger. She had built her life around the pain he caused her, and now that pain was slowly unraveling into something she didn't quite know how to name. One afternoon, he came to the park where Emily and Lily were feeding ducks by the pond. The air was cool, the sky soft with the light of early spring. He brought coffee for Emily and a paper bag of tiny bread pieces for Lily. "You didn't have to," Emily said, though she accepted the cup. "I know," he replied, smiling faintly, "but I wanted to." It was such a simple exchange, yet something about it felt monumental. For years their words had been weapons, filled with bitterness and regret. Now they were careful, kind, almost gentle. Lily ran ahead to throw bread into the water, and Michael turned to Emily. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. "About what?" she asked cautiously. He hesitated, his gaze following their daughter. "About how lucky I am that you didn't listen to me that night," he said quietly. "If you had, I never would have met her. I never would have understood what love actually is." Emily looked at him then, truly looked at him, and saw not the arrogant man who had thrown her out but someone stripped bare by life and guilt and love. "You were cruel," she said softly, her words not angry but honest. "You broke me." "I know," he said, his voice thick. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." She didn't answer, but her silence was no longer sharp. It was thoughtful, uncertain, but no longer closed. As the sun began to set, Lily came running back, her cheeks flushed from the wind. She held out her small hand to Michael. "Come play," she said simply, tugging at him. He smiled, got up, and followed her to the playground without hesitation. Emily watched them, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't see her past when she looked at him. She saw a man trying to build a future. Over the following weeks, the change became undeniable. They began to share dinners, small and simple, take-out meals eaten on the floor of Emily's apartment while Lily showed off her drawings. He was awkward at first, trying too hard, but soon the stiffness faded. He laughed more easily, stayed longer, and learned to listen instead of talk. Emily found herself looking forward to his visits, even though she told herself she shouldn't. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something close to it. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Emily stood on the balcony while Michael lingered inside, cleaning up the dishes. The city glowed around them, windows glittering like stars. When he joined her, they stood in silence for a long time, listening to the hum of the night. "I still remember the last thing I said to you before I left," he said quietly. "You said you wanted a child, but not with me," she replied without hesitation. He winced. "That's the sentence that haunts me every day," he admitted. "It's the thing I hear every time I look at her, every time I see you. I can't change what I said, but I wish you knew how much I regret it." Emily turned to him, her eyes soft but tired. "Regret doesn't erase pain," she said. "No," he agreed, "but maybe love can heal it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with the wrong word. Then, quietly, she said, "You hurt me so deeply that I stopped believing in love. But you're the reason I learned what real love is, because when you left, I had to give all of it to her." He looked at her, his expression filled with sorrow and admiration. "Then maybe," he said softly, "you can teach me how to love like that." Something inside her broke then, not in pain, but in release. Years of bitterness melted away, leaving only exhaustion and a strange, aching peace. She didn't say yes, didn't forgive him, not yet, but she didn't push him away either. They stood there in the quiet, their shoulders brushing lightly, both of them staring out at the city that had once swallowed their story and was now silently witnessing its rebirth. Weeks turned into months, and what began as fragile coexistence grew into something steady, something whole. Michael became part of their everyday life, not as the man who had abandoned them, but as a father who was learning, slowly, how to love without conditions. He picked Lily up from daycare, learned how to braid her hair badly, and stayed up late helping her build castles out of blocks that never stood straight but always made her laugh. Emily watched them from across the room sometimes, her heart full and terrified all at once. One evening, as they walked home together, Lily holding both their hands, she looked up and said innocently, "Mommy, do you love the nice man?" The question hit Emily like a rush of wind, stopping her in her tracks. Michael froze too, his gaze fixed on her. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. Then she crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I love you both very much," she said softly. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't a promise either. But it was real. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Michael stood by the door, ready to leave. "She's happy," he said quietly. "You've given her everything." Emily smiled faintly. "We've given her everything," she corrected. His eyes flickered with emotion. Do you think there's a chance, he asked slowly, for us to start over, not from where we were, but from who we are now? She looked at him for a long moment, her heart heavy with everything they had endured. Then she nodded, just once. Maybe, she said, her voice trembling. But don't rush it. Let it grow. He smiled then, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and for the first time in years, Emily didn't feel afraid of it. As he left, she stood at the window, watching him walk down the quiet street until he disappeared into the night. Behind her, Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something soft. Emily turned and looked at her daughter, her miracle, her proof that love could survive even the worst of endings. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before: sometimes the people who break us aren't meant to be erased. Sometimes they're meant to return, changed, to show us that healing doesn't come from forgetting the pain, but from facing it and choosing love anyway. And as the night wrapped around the city, Emily finally let herself breathe again, not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time, she truly believed it could be.
What if your dying father's last wish trapped you in a desperate marriage of convenience, forcing you to choose between an empire and a love you never wanted? Michael Sterling slammed his fist onto the hospital bedside table, sending pills skittering across its surface. "You can't do this to me," he roared, his voice laced with disbelief and fury. "It's my right, Dad." Arthur Sterling, pale and frail in his hospital bed, met his son's gaze with unwavering resolve. "It's my company, Michael, and I can do whatever I want with it. I built that empire with my bare hands." Arthur coughed, a wet, rattling sound, but his eyes never left Michael's. "I put you there, Michael, and I've watched you become a cold, calculating man, just like I was. I don't want you to end up alone, like me." "What are you talking about?" Michael retorted, running a frustrated hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I have everything I need. Money, power. What else is there? When was the last time you felt something real for someone?" Arthur challenged, his voice weak but sharp. "You don't need a wife to run the company, Michael. My decision is final." Arthur pulled a legal-sized envelope from beneath his pillow. "This is my updated will. If you aren't married by your 36th birthday, my shares will transfer to a charitable foundation, and the board of directors will remove you as CEO. You have a minimal stake in the company, Michael. It won't be enough to stop them." "That's 6 months from now," Michael spluttered, incredulous. "Time enough to find love, don't you think?" Arthur offered a weak, knowing smile. Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Love? This is about control, as always. It's about saving you, son." Arthur closed his eyes, utterly exhausted. "I don't want my only child to end his days counting money in an empty office. You can't force me to marry." "No, I can't," Arthur conceded, reopening his eyes, his gaze piercing. "But I can make sure you at least try." His voice dropped to a whisper. 6 months, Michael. Find a wife, start a family, or lose everything." Michael backed away from the bed, his fists clenched, jaw tight. "This is insane. You're insane." "It's my last will," Arthur stated, his voice barely audible. "And if you refuse, then I suppose you'll have to start from scratch. And believe me, it won't be easy to reclaim what you'll lose." Arthur offered a faint, almost pitying smile. Perhaps that's exactly what you need. Michael stared out the hospital window, observing the sprawling city he had always expected to control. 6 months. 6 months to find a wife or lose everything. The idea was utterly ridiculous, but he knew his father well enough to know he wasn't joking. "You'll regret this," he muttered under his breath. "Or perhaps," Arthur replied, his voice barely a breath, "someday you'll thank me." Michael stormed out of the room without looking back, his mind already furiously calculating possibilities. If he had to marry, he'd do it on his terms. A marriage of convenience, nothing more. He just needed to find someone willing to make a deal. What he didn't know was that fate was already setting the stage for something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. What happens when the impossible cost of a child's survival forces a mother to consider a desperate bargain, and a fateful newspaper ad promises a solution too good to be true? "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lopez, but we need full payment before we can schedule the surgery." The administrative assistant's voice echoed in Camila Lopez's ears as she squeezed her 6-year-old son, Sam's hand. They were at the hospital, and Sam's cough, a harsh, relentless sound, made Camila's heart clench. "Please, there must be something we can do," Camila pleaded, pulling out her worn folder of documents. "I have some savings. I can make a down payment. The operation costs $500,000, Mrs. Lopez. Your down payment doesn't even cover 10%. Sam coughed again, a sound that made Camila's world crumble. At 6, her son was too young to understand why his mom cried herself to sleep every night. "I work 3 jobs," Camila insisted, desperation lacing her voice. "I can get more. Time is crucial in these cases, ma'am. Without the operation in the next few weeks." The administrative assistant didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Camila knew. Camila left the hospital with Sam in her arms, her legs trembling beneath her. On the bus ride home, as her son slept fitfully beside her, she meticulously reviewed her accounts for the 1,000th time. First job at the coffee shop, $800. Cleaning houses, $600. Selling homemade food on weekends, $400. Total saved, $4,500. She still needed $455,000. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Sam woke up, his large brown eyes looking at her with innocent concern. "It's nothing, my love," Camila whispered, quickly wiping away her tears. "Are you hungry?" "A little," he mumbled. At home, as she prepared the cheapest dinner possible, Camila checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her landlord, reminding her about overdue rent. A notification from the bank about her rejected loan application. "Mommy, when can I play soccer like before?" The question broke her heart into a million pieces. "Soon, my love. Very soon." That night, after putting Sam to bed, Camila found an advertisement in the newspaper she'd brought home from the coffee shop. Personal assistant wanted for executive. Excellent pay. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. She didn't know that this call would change her life forever, or that desperation would lead her to accept a proposition that seemed far too good to be true. What if the only way to save your child was to enter a cold, calculated contract of marriage, sacrificing your freedom for a future you never imagined? Marriage? Camila nearly dropped her coffee cup, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You must be joking." Michael Sterling, seated across from her in his impeccably designed office, maintained a perfectly serious expression. "It's a business agreement, Mrs. Lopez. Simple and direct." The interview for the personal assistant position had taken an utterly unexpected turn. Camila observed the man before her. Flawless suit, calculating gaze, not a single hair out of place. He exuded an aura of unyielding control. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Maria, my housekeeper, told me about your situation," Michael replied, leaning back in his chair. "I need a wife before 6 months. You need money for your son's operation. It's a practical solution for both of us." Camila clutched her worn purse, her knuckles white. "And what exactly would this agreement entail?" "A year of marriage. You'll live with me, of course, to maintain appearances. I'll cover all your expenses, including Sam's operation and his recovery. At the end of the year, we divorce discreetly, and you receive a generous compensation. And you expect me to believe there are no other conditions? Camila challenged, a hint of suspicion in her voice. Michael raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. Mrs. Lopez, this is strictly professional. I need to inherit my father's company. For that, I need to be married. Nothing more. And Sam? Camila pressed, her voice thick with concern. The child will have his own room, access to the best doctors, and a good education during that year. Consider it a bonus. Camila rose, walking to the panoramic window. The bustling city stretched beneath her, as distant and unattainable as her chances of acquiring the money through normal means. Why don't you look for someone from your social circle? Michael let out a dry, humorless laugh. Because all those women would want more than a year. You have a clear motivation and a defined time limit. You're a logical choice. Sounds like you've thought of everything, Camila murmured, a touch of bitterness in her tone. It's what I do, Mrs. Lopez. Solve problems efficiently. Camila closed her eyes, picturing Sam, his medicines, the sleepless nights spent worrying about money. How long do I have to decide? Your son's operation is urgent, isn't it? I'll give you until tomorrow. Tomorrow. Camila spun around, disbelief etched on her face. Time is valuable, Mrs. Lopez. For both of us. Michael rose, pulling an envelope from his desk. Here's the contract. Read it. If you accept, we'll get married this week. He shrugged. If not, I wish you luck finding the money by other means. Camila took the envelope with trembling hands. The numbers in the contract made her dizzy. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Her son's health, his future, everything depended on her answer. I'll contact you tomorrow, Mr. Sterling. Michael, he corrected, a subtle, almost imperceptible softening in his voice. If we're going to be married, we might as well start using our first names. Camila nodded mechanically and walked out of the office. In the elevator, as it descended 30 floors, she opened the envelope. That night, as she watched Sam sleep, her decision was already made. Sometimes, a mother's love meant doing the unthinkable. What happens when a desperate bargain culminates in a soulless ceremony, and the rules of a fabricated marriage are laid bare, challenging the very idea of love and family? The courthouse was practically empty when Camila walked in, wearing a simple white dress she'd bought on sale. Michael was already there, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression, as if he were simply waiting for another business meeting to begin. "You're late," was his only greeting. "Sam had a crisis this morning," Camila explained, nervously smoothing down her dress. "I had to wait for my sister to come watch him." "Is he okay?" Michael asked, a flicker of something almost imperceptible in his eyes. "He will be," Camila replied, her voice firm, "after the operation." Michael nodded curtly and handed her a document. "Sign here. It's the confirmation of the hospital deposit." Camila looked at the paper. The full payment for Sam's operation was already processed. Her hand trembled as she signed. Maria, the housekeeper who had connected Camila with Michael, appeared with another witness, a serious-looking lawyer. There were no other guests. "Let's proceed," the judge said, glancing at his watch. "I have another ceremony in 20 minutes. The ceremony was mechanical, devoid of emotion. There were no personalized vows, no music, no tears of joy, just formal questions and clipped, short answers. Michael Sterling, do you take Camila Lopez as your lawfully wedded wife? Ido. His voice sounded like he was closing another deal. Camila Lopez, do you take Michael Sterling as your lawfully wedded husband? Camila thought of Sam, of the operation that was now possible, of the future this would secure for him. Ido. By the power vested in me by law, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The judge closed his book. You may sign the registry. There was no kiss, not even a hug. Michael simply slid a ring onto her finger, an elegant but discreet piece. The car's waiting, Michael said after they signed the papers. "I'll take you to the hospital so you can arrange everything for Sam. Then we'll go to the penthouse so you can settle in." In the car, the silence was heavy, oppressive. Camila gazed out the window, wondering what she had gotten herself into. "There are some rules," Michael said suddenly, breaking the tense quiet. "First, no unannounced visitors. Second, keep your son under control. No noise or mess. Third, if anyone asks, we met through mutual friends, and it was a whirlwind romance." "Anything else?" Camila asked, a touch of irony in her voice. "Yes, don't fall in love with me." Michael looked directly at her, his gaze cold and unwavering. "This is a business arrangement, nothing more." Camila almost laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Don't worry, Mr. Sterling. Love is the last thing I'm looking for in this arrangement." "Michael," he corrected, his voice firm. "In public, I'm Michael, and we're supposedly happily married." The car pulled up to the hospital. Before she got out, Michael added, "One last thing. Sam's operation is in 3 days. After that, we'll start appearing at social events. You'll need appropriate clothing. Maria will help you with that." Camila nodded mechanically and stepped out of the car. As she walked toward the hospital entrance, she wondered if she had just sold her soul to the devil. But when she thought of Sam and his imminent recovery, she knew that any price was worth it. What happens when a child's joy illuminates a cold, luxurious prison, and a mother struggles to navigate the harsh rules of a marriage built on convenience, not love? "Look, Mommy, my room is huge." Sam darted through the expansive bedroom, his small footsteps echoing on the polished wooden floor. It was the first time Camila had seen him so genuinely excited since his illness began. "My love, don't run," Camila warned, though a soft smile finally touched her lips. The room was indeed bigger than their entire old apartment. "And can I put my toys anywhere I want?" "The toys stay in your room," Michael's voice cut in from the doorway. Sam froze, suddenly timid in Michael's imposing presence. "And the noise too," Michael added without softening his tone. "Sam," he corrected, his voice firm. "If we're going to keep up appearances, you should call me Michael." Camila watched the exchange, a knot tightening in her stomach. The penthouse was breathtaking. 3 bedrooms, a panoramic view of the city skyline, furniture that looked straight out of a designer magazine. Yet, it felt cold, like a museum exhibit where nothing could truly be touched or lived in. "Dinner is at 8, Michael continued, without waiting for a response. "I'm usually not here, but tonight we need to discuss some things. Maria will show you the rest of the apartment." He left without another word, the sound of his expensive Italian shoes fading down the hallway. Maria, the housekeeper, appeared moments later. "Don't worry, ma'am. Mr. Michael is like that at first, but he's not a bad man." "I'm not worried about that, Maria," Camila replied, her voice strained. "I just want Sam to be comfortable, and he will be. Come, I'll show you the kitchen." The tour revealed an apartment designed to impress, not to live. Everything was minimalist in shades of gray and white. There were no family photos, no personal items, just abstract art and corporate awards. At exactly 8 o'clock, they were seated in the formal dining room. Sam, still weak from his medication, picked at his food. "Tomorrow preparations begin for the introductory party," Michael announced, checking his agenda on his phone. "Maria will take you shopping. You need a complete wardrobe." "A party?" Camila put down her fork, startled. "So soon? Society expects to meet my wife. It's part of the agreement," Michael said, his gaze fixed on her. "Sam is still recovering. Sam will stay with Maria that night. It's not an event for children." "This isn't up for discussion, Camila," Michael stated, his eyes piercing. "Appearing to be a happily married couple includes social events. It's part of the deal." Sam watched the exchange in silence, his big eyes moving between his mother and Michael. "Can I go to my room?" he asked softly. "Of course, my love," Camila responded, rising to help him. "He can go alone," Michael interrupted. "We need to finish talking." Sam slid from his chair and left the dining room. Camila watched him go, feeling the full, heavy weight of her decision more than ever. I know this is difficult, Michael said, surprising her with a softer tone. But it will work better if we follow the rules. Camila nodded, not trusting her voice to reply. That night, lying in her new, luxurious bedroom, she wondered how long they could maintain this charade before someone, inevitably, got hurt. What happens when the cold, calculated facade of a ruthless businessman begins to crack, revealing a surprising tenderness, and a child's innocent joy starts to melt a guarded heart? I can't go, Camila said, her voice tight, clutching the phone. I have an important meeting. Mrs. Lopez, it's Sam's monthly checkup. The nurse on the other end insisted. It's crucial for his post-operative follow-up. I know, but my boss. Camila bit her lip, remembering that technically Michael was her husband, not just her boss. I'll take him. Michael's voice startled her. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for work, a cup of coffee in his hand. What? Camila stammered. Tell the nurse I'll take Sam to his appointment, Michael said, sipping his coffee as if he hadn't just offered to do something extraordinary. Camila ended the call, looking at him with a mix of disbelief and distrust. It's not necessary. I can cancel my meeting. The meeting with the Korean investors is important, Michael replied, his gaze firm. I'll take the boy. But, don't you trust me? Michael raised an eyebrow. I'm his legal stepfather, aren't I? Before Camila could respond, Sam walked into the kitchen, dragging his school backpack. He stopped, surprised to see Michael, who was usually gone by now. Good morning, the boy mumbled. Sam, Michael said, surprisingly gently. Today, I'm taking you to the doctor. The boy's eyes widened. And Mommy? Mommy has work, Michael replied. Does it bother you to go with me? Sam looked at Camila, who nodded slightly. It's okay, the boy responded, a hint of curiosity replacing his shyness. 3 hours later, Camila couldn't focus on her meeting. Her phone was silent. No emergency calls, no messages from Michael. When the meeting finally ended, she found a message with a photo. Sam smiling in the hospital waiting room, holding a brand new toy robot. All good. We bought him something for his bravery, Michael's text read. That night at dinner, Sam wouldn't stop talking. And then Michael bought me a robot that transforms, and he said if I'm brave with the shots, we can go get more. Camila watched Michael, who pretended to be more interested in his plate than in the conversation. Can I go play with my robot now? Sam asked after dinner. Go ahead, Michael replied, to everyone's surprise. But remember, in your room. When Sam left, Camila couldn't hold back. Why did you do it? The toy? It's normal to reward children after a doctor's visit. No, taking Sam to the doctor. You could have sent Maria. Michael rose, carrying his plate to the sink. He stood looking out the window for a moment before speaking. I don't want Sam to grow up like I grew up, with a father who only cared about the family legacy. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I don't know how to be a father, Camila, but I want to try. Is it just for appearances? Camila asked, her voice soft, searching for the truth. For a moment, something flickered across Michael's face, an expression Camila couldn't decipher, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Of course, he replied, his voice reverting to its usual coldness. It's all for appearances. But that night, Camila heard him stop outside Sam's room. The door opened softly, and for a long moment, Michael just stood there, watching the boy sleep. What happens when a carefully constructed life of solitude is shattered by a sudden crisis, forcing a man to confront his deepest wounds and reveal a vulnerability he never knew he possessed? The shattering sound of breaking glass ripped through the penthouse's silent night. Camila, unable to sleep, her mind restless with a mix of worry and a strange, burgeoning hope, immediately went to the kitchen. She found Michael there, stoically sweeping up the shards of a broken glass. Let me help you, she said softly, bending down to assist him. No need, he mumbled, but his trembling hand betrayed his feigned calmness. "Are you drunk?" she asked gently, noticing the bottle of expensive whiskey on the counter, barely touched. "No," Michael sighed, running a weary hand over his face. "Just tired." Camila observed him, her gaze lingering on the raw vulnerability in his eyes. "Do you want to talk about it? Since when are we friends?" he retorted, a flash of his usual coldness returning. "Since never, but I'm your wife, aren't I?" She offered a small, ironic smile. "At least on paper." Michael looked at her for a long moment, his guard slowly, imperceptibly dropping. Then he poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He offered one to Camila and sat heavily on the kitchen island. "My father passed away today," he said finally, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. He was a manipulator until the very end." Michael took a long sip of his drink. "Do you know why he really forced me to get married?" Camila shook her head, listening intently. "My mother abandoned us when I was Sam's age. She ran off with her yoga instructor." He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "My father never recovered. He raised me to be just like him. Cold, calculating, successful in business, but a complete disaster at everything else. And that's why he wanted me to marry you. He wanted to save me." He made air quotes with his fingers, a cynical gesture, as if a forced marriage could fix anything. Camila swirled the whiskey in her glass, the ice clinking softly. "At least your father cared in his own way. Sam's father doesn't even know he exists." Michael looked at her, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his eyes. "You never looked for him?" "Why? When I told him I was pregnant, he blocked me everywhere. He was an exchange student. Went back to Spain and I never heard from him again." "Sam doesn't ask about him?" "Sometimes. I tell him some families are just 2 people and that's perfectly okay. But it's not enough, is it?" Camila looked at him, surprised by the unexpected honesty in his voice. "Why do you say that? I see how he looks at you when he comes home from school, like you're his entire world. It must be exhausting. He's my son. He's not a burden." "I didn't say he was." Michael finished his drink, the ice clinking loudly as he set the glass down. "But I understand the loneliness." They sat in silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of the city filtering through the windows. "Thank you," Michael said suddenly, his voice soft. "For what?" "For listening. For not judging." He stood, placing his glass in the sink. "And for giving Sam what I never had. A mother who would go to hell and back for him." Before Camila could respond, Michael was already heading to his bedroom. He paused in the hallway. "By the way," he added without turning around, "tomorrow, I'm taking Sam to the park. If you want to come." The invitation hung in the air, light and tentative. But Camila understood what it was. A small step towards something neither of them dared to name yet. "I'd love to," she responded softly, a fragile hope blooming in her chest. What happens when a fragile new connection is violently confronted by a ghost from the past, forcing a guarded heart to become a fierce protector? "Sam!" The shout echoed across the park, instantly freezing Camila. She knew that voice. "Who's that?" Michael asked, noticing Camila's sudden pallor. "Raoul," she whispered, her eyes wide with a chilling dread, as a man strode purposefully towards them. Sam, who had been playing on the swings, immediately ran to his mother, clinging to her leg. Michael, instinctively, stepped in front of them, his posture rigid. "Camila!" Raoul stopped directly in front of them, completely ignoring Michael. "Why aren't you answering my messages?" "What messages?" Camila hugged Sam tighter, trying to shield him. "How did you find me?" "I saw you in the society papers," Raoul sneered, a cruel glint in his eyes. "Billionaire Michael Sterling marries single mother. Very touching." His tone was mocking, dripping with disdain. "So, you landed yourself a millionaire?" "I suggest you remove yourself," Michael interjected, his voice cold as ice, cutting through Raoul's taunts. Raoul looked Michael up and down, a sneer on his face. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" That kid could be mine. I'm going to demand a DNA test, Raoul declared, a mocking smile playing on his lips. He's not yours. Camila exploded, her voice raw with fury. I told you years ago. The dates don't match. Well, the judge will decide that, Raoul replied, completely unconcerned. Michael's eyes narrowed dangerously. Do you want to risk a lawsuit for defamation and harassment? Raoul's face paled slightly, but he maintained his taunting smile. We'll see each other soon, darling. Michael took a step forward, grabbing Raoul by the collar, surprising everyone, including Camila. Listen to me closely, because I'll only say this once. You come near my family again, and I will destroy you. Your family? Raoul laughed, a high, disbelieving sound. How much did he pay you to say that? Michael tightened his grip on Raoul's shirt, pulling him closer. I have lawyers who can bury you in lawsuits until you can't even afford a cup of coffee. I have contacts who can make sure no company in this city ever hires you again. Want to test me? Raoul's bravado visibly faltered, his face paling. You can't. Test me. Michael! Camila touched his arm gently, her voice strained. Sam is scared. Michael released Raoul, who stumbled back several steps. This isn't over, Raoul threatened, but his voice trembled, devoid of its earlier confidence. Yes, it is over, Michael responded, his voice chillingly calm. Now get lost. When Raoul finally left, scurrying away, Camila noticed that Michael was subtly trembling, a tremor she wouldn't have seen if she hadn't been so close. Sam clung to her leg, silent and visibly shaken. Are you okay? Michael asked, his voice surprisingly soft, concern etching his features. Yes, thank you. Camila managed to whisper. Do you want to go home? Camila nodded, and instinctively reached down to pick up Sam, but Michael was quicker. To her surprise, Sam allowed himself to be carried without protest, burying his face in Michael's neck. In the car, as Sam dozed fitfully in the back seat, Camila finally spoke. You didn't have to threaten him like that. Yes, I did, Michael replied, his gaze fixed on the road. No one threatens my family. Michael, this is an agreement, Camila reminded him softly. I know, he interrupted her. But for as long as it lasts, you both are my responsibility. Both of you. Camila looked at him, noticing something different in his profile, a fierce protectiveness she hadn't seen before. For the first time, she wondered if this marriage was truly as fake as they both pretended. Thank you, she whispered. Michael nodded but said no more. He didn't need to. Something had changed at the park, and both of them knew it. What happens when you're thrust into a glittering world of pretense, only to uncover a hidden truth that shatters the fragile foundation of your convenient marriage? I'm not sure about this, Camila said, adjusting her navy blue gala dress, her voice tight with nerves. I don't belong in this world. What happens when a marriage built on a lie confronts the raw, painful truth, forcing two people to reckon with their deepest wounds and the hidden cost of their desperate bargain? The penthouse apartment had transformed into a silent battlefield. 3 agonizing days had passed since the gala, and Camila and Michael barely exchanged a single word, their unspoken conflict a suffocating presence. Sam keeps asking why you don't have dinner with us anymore, Camila said one night, finding Michael holed up in his sprawling study, surrounded by papers. I'm busy, he replied curtly, not looking up. Too busy for the child who's supposedly your responsibility? Camila challenged, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Michael dropped his papers, finally looking at her, his eyes cold. Don't use Sam against me. Why not? She retorted, her voice rising. You used us both. Do you really believe that? Michael stood, his voice suddenly sharp. Do you think this whole thing was just a calculated plan? What else could it be? She shot back, stepping closer, her voice thick with accusation. You sought out the most desperate single mother you could find. I chose you because you were different. Michael exploded, his voice uncharacteristically loud, raw with emotion. Because when I first saw you, you were selling coffee with a smile, even though your eyes were red from crying. You had dignity. You had strength. You were spying on me? Camila whispered, horrified. I observed you for weeks, he admitted, his voice softening, a note of vulnerability in his tone. I saw how you treated people, how fiercely you loved your son, how you carried yourself with such grace despite everything. And that gave you the right to manipulate me? I gave you an option. You could have said no. You knew I couldn't say no. Camila slammed her hand on the desk, the sound sharp in the tense silence. My son was dying, and I gave you everything to save him. Money isn't everything, Michael, isn't it? He retorted, a bitter laugh escaping him. Then why are you so angry about the millions I didn't tell you I had? I'm angry because you lied to me, she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. Because you made me believe we were equals in this, that we both desperately needed something from each other. And isn't that true? He pressed, stepping closer, his voice soft, almost a plea. No, you didn't need anything from me. You could have bought any woman. Michael closed the distance between them until he stood directly in front of her. Perhaps I didn't want to buy anyone. Perhaps I wanted. What? Camila challenged, her voice trembling. What did you want? Something real. His voice dropped to a whisper, raw with a vulnerability he rarely showed. Even if it was for the wrong reasons. You can't buy something real, she said, shaking her head. No, but I could hope for it. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep weariness. And for a moment, when we were at the park, when I defended Sam, when you let me be part of his life, for a moment it was real. All of it. Camila felt tears sting her eyes. I don't know what's real anymore, and what isn't. Stay, Michael said softly, his voice firm. Not for the contract, not for the money. Stay and let's find out together. I can't. Camila backed away, her voice strained. I don't trust you, Michael. When Sam's treatment is finished, we're leaving. Michael nodded, his expression somber, a shadow falling over his face. Is that what you really want? Camila opened her mouth to answer, but stopped. She looked at Sam, happily playing with his new robot on the sofa, oblivious to the storm raging around him. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if it's the right thing, but I'm terrified of staying, and for this all to be just an illusion. She walked out of the study, leaving Michael alone with his spiraling thoughts and a bottle of whiskey that, for the first time in a very long time, he genuinely needed. You belong where I belong, Michael responded, straightening his tie, his gaze firm. You're my wife. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was the social event of the year. Camila could feel the curious stares as Michael guided her through the opulent ballroom. Michael, darling, an elegant woman purred, approaching them with a dazzling smile. Aren't you going to introduce us to your mysterious wife? Isabel, meet Camila, Michael said, placing his hand on the small of Camila's back, a possessive gesture. My wife. Ah, the famous Camila. Everyone's talking about how you managed to conquer Mexico's most coveted bachelor. Isabel's tone was laced with thinly veiled condescension. Camila offered a polite, practiced smile. Michael actually conquered me. And how did you two meet? Isabel pressed, her eyes sharp with curiosity. At a coffee shop, Michael replied smoothly, before Camila could speak. She spilled coffee all over my Italian suit. Camila looked at him, surprised. They hadn't rehearsed this story. It was love at first sight, Michael continued, his eyes meeting hers, a subtle, knowing glint in their depths. Though she made me work for it. Fascinating, Isabel murmured, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. If you'll excuse me. As Isabel walked away, Camila whispered, Coffee on your suit? It's more believable than saying I hired you to inherit a company, Michael replied, a wry smirk on his face. Camila was about to retort when she overheard a nearby conversation. They say he'll inherit over $500 million. The entire Sterling Empire. And she didn't even know he was a multimillionaire. Camila froze, the blood draining from her face. Million? Michael had spoken about his family's business, but he had never ever mentioned amounts. Michael, her voice trembled slightly. Can we talk in private? He led her to a secluded balcony, away from the glittering crowd and the murmuring voices. $500 million? Camila confronted him, her voice barely a whisper, thick with disbelief and a rising fury. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything? Michael countered, his voice flat. Of course. She stopped, feeling a wave of betrayal. You made me believe you needed the company to survive. I need the company because it's my life, Michael responded, his voice hardening. The money is secondary. Secondary? Camila echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her. You could have paid for 100 operations like Sam's. You could have chosen anyone. And what would that change? Michael stepped closer, his gaze intense. Would you have asked for more? No, she said, recoiling slightly. But I deserved to know the truth. You made me feel like I was helping you as much as you were helping me. That we were equal in this. She shook her head. No, you lied to me. You manipulated me. I only omitted information, Michael argued, his voice strained. How could you omit that your father died leaving you millions? Or that you could have found 1,000 other women willing to marry you for that fortune? Perhaps I wanted someone who would marry me for other reasons, Michael said, his voice softer. Like desperation. Camila let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. Camila, wait. When Sam's treatment is finished, I'm leaving, she declared, turning towards the door, her voice resolute. And you can keep your millions. Michael was left alone on the balcony, holding a champagne glass he never got to drink, as the gala music continued to play, oblivious to his shattered world. What happens when a marriage built on a lie confronts the raw, painful truth, forcing two people to reckon with their deepest wounds and the hidden cost of their desperate bargain? The penthouse apartment had transformed into a silent battlefield. 3 agonizing days had passed since the gala, and Camila and Michael barely exchanged a single word, their unspoken conflict a suffocating presence. Sam keeps asking why you don't have dinner with us anymore, Camila said one night, finding Michael holed up in his sprawling study, surrounded by papers. I'm busy, he replied curtly, not looking up. Too busy for the child who's supposedly your responsibility? Camila challenged, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Michael dropped his papers, finally looking at her, his eyes cold. Don't use Sam against me. Why not? She retorted, her voice rising. You used us both. Do you really believe that? Michael stood, his voice suddenly sharp. Do you think this whole thing was just a calculated plan? What else could it be? She shot back, stepping closer, her voice thick with accusation. You sought out the most desperate single mother you could find. I chose you because you were different. Michael exploded, his voice uncharacteristically loud, raw with emotion. Because when I first saw you, you were selling coffee with a smile. Even though your eyes were red from crying, you had dignity. You had strength. You were spying on me? Camila whispered, horrified. I observed you for weeks, he admitted, his voice softening, a note of vulnerability in his tone. I saw how you treated people, how fiercely you loved your son, how you carried yourself with such grace despite everything. And that gave you the right to manipulate me? I gave you an option. You could have said no. You knew I couldn't say no. Camila slammed her hand on the desk, the sound sharp in the tense silence. My son was dying, and I gave you everything to save him. Money isn't everything, Michael, isn't it? He retorted, a bitter laugh escaping him. Then why are you so angry about the millions I didn't tell you I had? I'm angry because you lied to me, she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. Because you made me believe we were equals in this, that we both desperately needed something from each other. And isn't that true? He pressed, stepping closer, his voice soft, almost a plea. No, you didn't need anything from me. You could have bought any woman. Michael closed the distance between them until he stood directly in front of her. Perhaps I didn't want to buy anyone. Perhaps I wanted What? Camila challenged, her voice trembling. What did you want? Something real. His voice dropped to a whisper, raw with a vulnerability he rarely showed. Even if it was for the wrong reasons. You can't buy something real, she said, shaking her head. No, but I could hope for it. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep weariness. And for a moment, when we were at the park, when I defended Sam, when you let me be part of his life, for a moment it was real. All of it. Camila felt tears sting her eyes. I don't know what's real anymore, and what isn't. Stay, Michael said softly, his voice firm. Not for the contract, not for the money. Stay and let's find out together. I can't. Camila backed away, her voice strained. I don't trust you, Michael. When Sam's treatment is finished, we're leaving. Michael nodded, his expression somber, a shadow falling over his face. Is that what you really want? Camila opened her mouth to answer, but stopped. She looked at Sam, happily playing with his new robot on the sofa, oblivious to the storm raging around him. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if it's the right thing, but I'm terrified of staying, and for this all to be just an illusion. She walked out of the study, leaving Michael alone with his spiraling thoughts and a bottle of whiskey that, for the first time in a very long time, he genuinely needed. What happens when the silence you craved becomes a torment, and the absence of one person makes the entire world feel empty, forcing you to confront the devastating consequences of your fear? The sound of the elevator was different now. Michael noticed it every morning when he rode it down to his car, no longer hearing Sam's joyful shouts or Camila's soft footsteps. The penthouse, which had once felt like a perfect refuge, now felt too large, too eerily empty. Sir, Maria said, placing a cup of coffee on his desk. Dinner is served. I'm not hungry, Michael mumbled, not looking up from his documents. You haven't had a proper dinner in 3 days, Maria insisted, her voice unusually firm. Michael finally looked up from his papers. Are you my mother now, Maria? No, sir. But I'm the one who sees how you're destroying yourself. I'm busy. The company is better than ever. It's you who's worse than ever. Michael leaned back in his chair, utterly exhausted. Have you seen them? Maria's gaze softened. Sam asks about you. Yesterday at the hospital during his checkup. You went to the hospital? Someone had to go, since you're hiding here. Michael rose abruptly. I'm not hiding. Aren't you? Then why do you work until dawn? Why do you eat alone in your office? Why do you avoid the rooms where they... Enough! Michael slammed his fist on the desk, the sharp sound echoing in the silent room. I don't need this. I don't need them. Then I suppose you don't need these photos either. Maria pulled a few photographs from her apron pocket. Michael took them with trembling hands. Sam on the swings, Camila cooking, all 3 of them at the park. Photos he hadn't even known existed. I found them when I was cleaning your jacket, Maria explained. You were carrying them in your wallet. I was. Yes, you were. Maria walked to the door. And they miss you too, even if she's too proud to admit it. When Maria left, Michael stood staring at the photos. When had he started carrying them? When had this pretense turned into something more? His phone vibrated. A message from Camila. Sam has a fever. Nothing serious, but he's asking for you. Michael looked at the time, 11 p.m. Without a second thought, he grabbed his keys. The drive to the hospital had never felt so long. When he arrived, he found Sam asleep and Camila slumped, exhausted, in a chair. What are you doing here? She whispered, surprised. You needed me, he replied, his voice hoarse. We don't need you. Maybe I need you both, Michael said, his voice raw with an honesty that surprised even himself. Camila looked at him, surprised by the unexpected sincerity in his voice. Michael, don't say anything, she whispered, pulling another chair close. Just let me stay. And so they spent the night in a silence that, for the first time in days, didn't feel like war, while Sam slept peacefully, as if he knew that, somehow, his family was complete again, even if only for one night. In his pocket, the crumpled photos reminded Michael of everything he had gained without realizing it, and everything he could lose if he didn't learn to fight for what truly mattered. What happens when a child's life hangs in the balance, forcing a shattered family to unite in a desperate fight against time, and forging a bond stronger than any contract? Michael! Michael! Camila's scream tore through the apartment like a knife, chilling him to the bone. Michael leaped from his bed and sprinted towards Sam's room. The boy was pale, trembling, his lips almost blue. "He's not responding," Camila sobbed, clutching Sam. "The fever came back, and he's not responding. Call an ambulance," Michael ordered, instantly taking Sam into his arms. "I'm taking him to the car. It'll be faster." They rushed to the parking garage in a blur of frantic movement and raw fear. Michael drove like never before, ignoring traffic lights, the city a blur, while Camila held Sam tightly in the back seat, murmuring desperate prayers. "My love, please wake up," Camila whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please. 5 minutes," Michael promised, his voice strained, tight with a new kind of fear. "Hold on 5 minutes, champ." At the hospital, doctors immediately whisked Sam away. Camila tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "I need to be with him," she pleaded. "The doctors need space to work," the nurse explained. "Please wait here." Michael had never seen Camila so utterly distraught. Without thinking, he pulled her into a fierce embrace, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably against his chest. "I can't lose him," she choked out. "I can't." "You won't." Michael squeezed her tighter. "I won't let it happen." Hours stretched into an eternity. Michael made frantic calls, pulled every string he could, ensuring the best specialists arrived in minutes. Camila paced, prayed, wept, and waited, a living statue of grief. "Family of Sam Lopez?" a doctor finally called. "Sterling," Michael automatically corrected, his voice firm. "Sam Sterling." The doctor nodded. Sam had an adverse reaction to his medication. His body rejected the treatment. "What does that mean?" Camila asked, her voice trembling. "We need to change the entire protocol. It will be more aggressive, more costly." "Money is not a problem," Michael interrupted, his voice unwavering. "What does he need? Medications from abroad? More specialists? Just tell me what he needs. No expense is too great." The doctor looked at his notes. "There's an experimental treatment in Houston. It's cutting edge." "We'll do it," Michael declared, his decision immediate and absolute. "Michael," Camila whispered, touching his arm. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted, looking directly at her, his eyes shining with a fierce, undeniable love. "He's my son too." The words tumbled out, unbidden, but they were the truth. At some point, without even realizing it, Sam had become his son. Not by a piece of paper, not by a contract, but by love. "Can we see him?" Camila asked the doctor. "He's stable now. You can go in one at a time." "You go," Michael said. "I'll make the arrangements for Houston." But Camila took his hand. "Come with me. He needs you. We need you." In the room, Sam slept, connected to machines that softly beeped. Michael and Camila sat on either side of his bed, holding his tiny hands, forming a bridge of love over his sleeping body. "Thank you," Camila whispered. Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. For the first time, he was exactly where he was meant to be, with the people he needed in his life. What happens when a life-and-death struggle redefines true success, forcing a man to sacrifice an empire for the profound wealth of love, and a family finds its real foundation amidst a desperate fight for survival? The journey to Houston changed everything. In the tense waiting room of Texas Children's Hospital, while Sam underwent his experimental treatment, Michael made a life-altering decision. "I don't care about the inheritance anymore," he said suddenly, breaking hours of strained silence. Camila looked up from her cold coffee, startled. "What?" "All of it. The company, the money, my father's will. It means nothing anymore." "Michael, you're tired." Camilla whispered, trying to make sense of his words. You're not thinking clearly. On the contrary, he countered, sitting beside her, taking her hand. For the first time in my life, I see everything with absolute clarity. When Sam stopped breathing that night, his voice broke, thick with the raw emotion he had so long suppressed. In that moment, I would have given the entire sterling fortune just to see him smile one more time. Camilla instinctively squeezed his hand, her eyes welling up. But the company is your life. No, Michael said, looking directly into her eyes, his gaze unwavering. You too are my life. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Camilla had learned to recognize as a sign of his vulnerability. It took me almost losing you both to realize that. What are you talking about? Camilla asked, her voice soft with a fragile hope. All my life, I believed success was measured in numbers in a bank account. My father taught me that, but he was wrong. And what are you going to do? I'm going to give it all up, start over, from scratch. You can't do that, Camilla exclaimed, disbelief coloring her voice. Why not? Because, Camilla hesitated, her gaze dropping. Because I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. I'm not going to lose anything, Michael said, a gentle, genuine smile gracing his lips. I'm going to gain everything that truly matters. A doctor appeared at the doorway. Sterling family? Both Michael and Camilla leaped to their feet. The treatment is working, the doctor announced, a quiet triumph in his voice. Sam is responding better than expected. Camilla immediately began to cry tears of overwhelming relief. Michael pulled her into a fierce embrace, and this time, she didn't pull away. Can we see him? Michael asked, his voice thick with emotion. In a few minutes. He's asking for his dad. Michael froze. For me? Yes, the doctor smiled. He's been saying he wants to show his dad his new robot. When the doctor left, Camilla looked at Michael, her eyes shining. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted, his voice resolute. I want to be his father. Not by a piece of paper, not for appearances. I want to be his father because I love him. And Camilla, he said, taking her hands, his voice dropping to a raw, heartfelt whisper. I love you too. The words came out naturally, as if they had been waiting for this very moment to be spoken. Not for the contract, not for the inheritance. I love you because you are you. Camilla looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, any lingering pretense. She found none. What will happen when we go back to New York? She asked softly, her voice still trembling. We'll start fresh. The three of us. Michael squeezed her hands. If you want to. And what if it doesn't work? It will work. The certainty in his voice was unshakable, absolute. Because this time it's real. A nurse appeared. You can go in and see Sam now. Before entering, Camilla stopped Michael. I love you too, she whispered, her voice fragile. And it scares me how much I love you. Michael smiled. A true, unmasked smile, devoid of pretense. It scares me too. But for the first time in my life, it's a fear worth feeling. They entered Sam's room together, not as a marriage by contract, but as a real family, united by something far stronger than paper or money. The love they had found without even looking for it. What happens when true success is redefined, not by a towering empire, but by the quiet courage to abandon it all for the profound wealth of family and the promise of a life built on your own terms. The Sterling Industries building loomed imposingly against the New York City skyline. Michael entered the lobby with Camilla by his side, both impeccably dressed for the crucial board meeting. Are you sure about this? Camilla whispered, her voice laced with a final touch of apprehension. Completely, Michael affirmed, squeezing her hand. Sam's leaving the hospital tomorrow. I want to start our new life unburdened. In the boardroom, the stunned faces of the executives reflected their incredulity at what they had just heard. You're renouncing your inheritance? The lead attorney, Mr. Davis, adjusted his glasses, his voice flat with disbelief. Michael, that's over $500 million. I know, Michael remained serene, his gaze unwavering. And I'm giving it all up. Your father. My father wanted me to find something more valuable than money, Michael said, looking directly at Camila, a soft smile gracing his lips. And I found it. Mr. Davis closed the file and sighed, running a hand over his face. Michael, renouncing the company isn't just signing a paper. The press will tear you apart. The board of directors will see you as a traitor. Are you ready for that? Michael's fists clenched, but his expression didn't waver. I'm ready. He pulled out some documents. But the company will pass to the foundation as stipulated in the alternative will. I've already signed the formal renunciation of my hereditary rights. Mr. Davis reviewed the papers, searching for any error, any loophole. This is irrevocable. It's what I want. Michael, another executive interjected, his voice tight. You've worked your entire life for this. No. Michael stood, his presence commanding despite his relinquishment of power. I worked my entire life for what my father wanted. Now, I'm going to work for what I want. And what exactly is that? I'm going to open my own company, smaller, more personal. Something I can manage without sacrificing time with my family. Murmurs filled the room. Camila watched in silent admiration, her heart swelling with pride at Michael's unwavering determination. The papers are in order, Mr. Davis finally announced. I just need your final signature. Michael took the pen. Before signing, he looked at Camila, a question in his eyes. Any regrets? None, she responded with a genuine smile. The signature was swift, decisive. In a single stroke, Michael Sterling transformed from the heir of an empire to a free man. Congratulations, Mr. Davis said dryly. You've just renounced a fortune. No, Michael corrected, taking Camila's hand, his eyes shining. I've just gained something far more valuable. They walked out of the building into the midday sun. Michael paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering skyscraper that would no longer be his. Are you okay? Camila asked softly. Better than ever, he replied, taking out his employee ID and looking at it one last time. You know, for years I believed this building was my destiny, that I had to be worthy of it, of the Sterling name. And now I know my destiny is at home with Sam and with you. He tossed the ID into a nearby trash can. Ready for our new life? Without millions? Without the family business? Without mansions? Camila teased, a playful glint in her eyes. With love, he responded, his voice filled with profound conviction. With real family, with genuine laughter. Camila stepped closer and kissed him, not caring who saw them. I'm ready. Then let's go, Michael said, checking his watch. Sam's leaving the hospital tomorrow, and we need to get his room ready in our new apartment. New apartment? A smaller one, more cozy.
A Real Loma.
They walked away, hand in hand, leaving the Sterling building and all it represented behind them. Michael had never felt richer than in that moment, with Camila's hand in his and the future stretching wide open before them. What happens when the journey of 1,000 painful steps leads to the most precious of destinations, and a family, forged in adversity, finally finds its true home, built on love, laughter, and unbreakable bonds? Welcome home, champ. Michael opened the door to their new apartment, carrying Sam in his arms. The place was considerably smaller than the penthouse, but it felt warmer, more alive, filled with an immediate sense of belonging. Balloons and a welcome home. Sam, banner decorated the living room. Is this our new house? Sam asked, looking around with wide-eyed curiosity. Do you like it? Camila bit her lip, a mix of nervousness and hope in her voice. I love it. Sam squirmed in Michael's arms until he was gently put down. Can I see my room? Of course, Michael replied, a tender smile on his face. In fact, we have a surprise for you in there. Sam's room was small but cozy, with light blue walls and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. In one corner, a collection of robots, his obsession since the hospital, awaited him. My robots! Sam shrieked, running towards them. And there are new ones. Michael bought them for you, Camila explained, her voice soft with happiness. Sam turned to Michael, his eyes shining. Really? Really? Michael knelt beside him. Sam, there's something I want to ask you. What? Would you like me to be your dad? Not just by name, but for real. Sam looked at him seriously, with that intense gaze only children possess. You won't leave again? Never. Michael felt a lump form in his throat. If you accept me, I'll stay forever. Sam looked at his mother, who was nodding, tears in her eyes, and then back at Michael. Without a word, he launched himself into Michael's arms. Yes, I do, he whispered, his small voice muffled against Michael's shoulder. Yes, I want you to be my dad. Camila joined the hug, and for a moment, the world outside that room ceased to exist. Later, after putting Sam to bed, Michael and Camila sat on the small balcony of their new home. Do you miss your old life? Camila asked softly. The life where I had everything except what truly mattered? Michael smiled, squeezing her hand. No, I don't miss it. But you gave up so much for us. I gave up nothing. Michael took her hand. I gained everything. He paused, his gaze thoughtful. My father believed he was punishing me with that condition in his will, but he actually gave me the greatest gift of my life. He forced me to find you both. Camila smiled, a gentle, knowing curve of her lips. So, you don't regret spilling coffee on your Italian suit? Michael chuckled. That fake story is becoming more real than the true one. Perhaps because the ending is real. Camila snuggled against him. Love is real, and it's worth more than any inheritance. From Sam's room, the soft sound of his breathing reached them. There were no more contracts to fulfill, no more appearances to maintain. Just a real family, built on foundations stronger than money or duty. I love you, Camila whispered. I love you more, Michael responded. And under the stars of New York City, on a balcony much smaller than his previous one, but infinitely happier, they sealed with a kiss the beginning of their true love story. Part 16, The True Fortune. What happens when a new life begins, built not on the ruins of the past, but on the enduring strength of love, family, and the unwavering courage to choose what truly matters. A year later, the garden of the small church was decorated with white and gold flowers. It wasn't an ostentatious wedding like those usually held in New York's high society, but every detail radiated genuine love. Are you nervous? Sam asked Michael, adjusting his tie. A little, Michael admitted, smiling at his son. Do you have the rings? Sam patted the pocket of his small suit. Safe, Dad. The word dad still made Michael's heart swell with joy. It was no longer a title by contract, but one earned with love and time. When Camila appeared at the church entrance, in a simple white dress and a radiant smile, Michael felt himself fall in love all over again. We are here, the priest began, to celebrate not the beginning, but the confirmation of a love that grew in the most unexpected circumstances. Sam watched everything from the front row, his eyes shining with happiness. He was no longer the sick boy from a year ago. Now he overflowed with health and joy. I, Michael, promise to love you not out of duty or convenience, but because my heart chose to. I promise to be the husband and father our family deserves, and to be grateful every day for the blessing of having you both in my life. I, Camila, promise to love you with the same strength with which you love our son. I promise to be your companion in this new life we choose together, and to always remind you that true value is not in what you have, but in what you give. When Sam approached with the rings, his small hands proudly holding the cushion, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. By the power vested in me by love and faith, the priest concluded, I now pronounce you once again and forever husband and wife. The kiss that followed wasn't that of a sealed contract, but of a promise fulfilled. A promise of true love that no fortune could ever buy. Dear friends, if this story of love between Michael and Camila moved you as much as it did me, don't hesitate to give us a like and share it with your loved ones. It's incredible how an agreement that began out of necessity transformed into true love. Don't you think? I'd love to know where you are watching this story from, and what you thought of the moment Michael gave up everything for love. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that true love exists, and sometimes arrives in the most unexpected ways. Where are you watching us from? Tell us in the comments.